Welcome back to drawing, everybody. So for this video, I'm going to be demonstrating basic shading. We're going to start with hatching, then I'm going to show you cross hatching, and then we'll also talk a little bit about blended shading and everything like that at the end. Now, for the sake of time on this video, I have already gone ahead and drawn out my still life. I have the video more zoomed in so you can really see what I'm doing this time. I do have my still life set up over here, so I will be looking back and forth to it, but hopefully you'll be able to really see what I'm doing in the drawing here. Now, unlike you guys, I want you guys to draw on a full sheet of your drawing paper, but for this I'm drawing my drawing 9 inches by 12 inches just for the sake of time once again, and I'm only doing 3 objects. Make sure that you guys are paying attention to the instructions on the instruction sheet and everything like that. All right, so like I said, for this video I'm going to be demonstrating how to go about doing a variety of different kinds of shading, starting with hatching, going to cross hatching, and then we'll touch on blended shading here toward the end. Now, in drawing my my line work already, I utilized all of the same principles from the sighting and angle sighting video. So I started very simply with a couple rectilinear shapes and then began to make subdivisions and then my angles and everything like that. And after I kind of got all of my basic, kind of forms and angles and shapes and everything in, I did go back in and I kind of finessed all of my curves, if you will, and my line work. So you can probably still see some of my light sketchy lines here and there. In this case, I left many of them present because they're also going to help me determine where some of my shading is going to be, such as the line that comes here. It's not in my actual object a hard edge line like the exterior here. However, it does delineate an area of shadow. So I've left some of that present. However, as I go, a lot of this is either going to be obscured or I might come back in and erase some of it here and there. So you'll kind of see me kind of go a little bit back and forth with this. Now, everything I've done up to this point was done with the 2B pencil. So I started off very lightly. I'm not pressing down on it. Just kind of letting the pencil glide across the paper, really. And even then, as I started to refine my line work, you can see some of it got a little darker. But I was kind of applying a little bit more pressure there, but trying to be fluid in my action based on my sketchy lines that I had already created. So for this, I'm going to start off again doing my shading with my 2B pencil, and I'm going to go very lightly with this. So I'm going to start by kind of hatching the majority of this drawing just to give you an idea of where the kind of shadows and everything is going to lie. And then I'm going to start refining that through cross hatching with my 4B, 6B, and I've even got my 9B pencil here. So I'm going to kind of go in succession. If you have more pencils, you can obviously kind of go 2, 4, 6, 8, etc., etc. That being said, I also have my erasers. So I've got my big eraser and then I've got my 2 little detaily erasers, which you might see me use. I've also got a blending stump and my pencil sharpener. So this might use this a little bit at the end. Just to show you kind of how we can transform cross hatching or basic shading into a more refined kind of shading. And you'll probably also see me use my maul stick here as well. So once again, all that being said, we start off very simply, simple shapes, simple angles, everything like that. And then I begin to refine my line work, finesse my curves, etc., etc. And it's important to note that a lot of this is kind of back and forth as well. know, especially like these kind of more interesting, you know, kind of curves like in the lid of the blender jar here. It definitely took a little bit of finagling to get it fairly accurate, especially since there are areas that we see in reflection through the glass and everything like that. So what I am drawing here is once again a blender kind of, you know, cup thing. We also have a pitcher, a small pitcher, as well as an electric can opener. So I like that because we have kind of delineations in tone, but we also have something, you know, kind of transparent there, and then my back drop as well. So starting off, once again, I want to take my 2B pencil and I'm going to start just hatching. And hatching is when we make parallel lines that are all going one direction. And I'm going to use this to lay in where my basic areas of shadow are going to be. And then from there, I might go in and, you know, switch pencils and then start to darken it by cross hatching. And then we'll kind of work our way up that way. And then at the end, I'll break out the 9B pencil and then we'll really kind of darken a few very selective kinds of things. So right off the bat, let's just get going. So you don't see my reference. Hopefully you can really see the drawing though. But know that I'm looking at my reference objects off to the right of me here. So what I want to do, and you'll see I've got a few areas that are kind of delineated somewhat, but for this, I don't really want to go dark yet. I want to go from light to dark. And so that way I can make adjustments and everything like that. And so in this case, I'm just looking at the forms that I see, and I'm trying to make just some you know, parallel lines all going in the same direction. And you can see I'm holding my pencil on the side for this. This helps me to not push down too hard, because if I push down really hard and drag, they're going to be really dark marks, even though this is a 2B pencil, and it's going to indent the paper. So if I have to erase it, it's not going to erase quite as well and everything like that. So right now I'm kind of almost using lines to color in the areas of shadow, like the heavy shadow that I see. And once again, we're going to kind of work this up here and there, and you might see me come back in and erase here and there, and, you know, all kinds of stuff. So bear with me there, because once again, it's something that, you know, we want to start from very light and very general, kind of give those ideas of where things are, and then we begin to refine them. And so we want to pay very close attention to everything that we see within our drawing as well. So in fact, a lot of this area is going to be somewhat shaded. And so some of this, like this area I'm doing right now, might not go much further than that. However, there will be little areas within it where we're going to kind of punch it up just a little bit. And then likewise, we're going to go through and do some kind of erasing and other things like that here and there. And so as we refine everything. So bear with me. You know, this is, once again, I've went ahead and did the drawing for the sake of time, or the line work, I should say. That way that hopefully this video won't be excessively long. However, know that I want you guys to take your time with this. You know, make sure that you're really paying attention to what you are, you know, looking at in your reference objects. You know, because the more you look at your objects, the more you look at your subject, the more things you're going to see, you know, that you might not otherwise at just a quick glance, if you will. So, like I said, we're just going to kind of, and right now I'm just hatching. I'm just making lines that are going all the same direction. I'm doing it very lightly, just to kind of indicate where my shadow areas are going to be. And it's going to get more refined as we go as well. So, and we'll get, more specific and how dark we're doing, and where some of my lines end and things like that. So you might also see me come back in and erase here and there. I'll probably actually go back in and erase quite a bit toward the end to bring the highlights back out. Right now, just drawing on this with graphite on this particular drawing paper. The graphite tends to smudge fairly easy, which is really nice, in terms of trying to do like blended shading and everything like that. But it also tends to make all of your highlights and whatnot a little dirty, so you kind of have to go back and erase your highlights back out from time to time. And so once again, I'm doing things like right now, I'm kind of laying some of this in areas that are going to be highlighted. It's just that they're not going to be as much of a highlight, or they're not going to have as much of a highlight as, say, the white can opener here and everything like that. So it might look like I'm just kind of touching everything right now, but here in a little bit we're going to get more and more selective as we go. So just keep that in mind. So there. I'm going to jump over here a little bit. So once again, you'll see that I'm almost kind of just coloring things in, to be honest. Very lightly. Once again, I'm using the side of my pencil. I'm not pushing the pencil into the paper at all. I'm literally just letting the tip of the graphite sit on top of the paper, and then I'm just kind of letting it glide as I move my hand. And once again, the idea of this is just to create the general idea of where things are going to be shadowed, so that I have that as a reference point. All right. And here in a minute, you'll see that, I'll really start to erase things and pull them out. And after I start establishing some of the deeper areas as I go, things like that. So, just bear with me for a while. Now, aside from that, my background is all going to be pretty much really dark, so my drapery and things. So I'm just going to kind of generally fill that in, and I'll use this lighter kind of bit as my highlights in those dark drapes and everything like that. Now, right now, I'm kind of going over my line, my exterior line. However, I can come back and erase that here in a few minutes. So once again, I'm trying to make everything go the same direction with my lines. This isn't going to read quite so much as straight hatching right now, but as I begin to deepen some of these things, it's definitely going to read more as hatched lines, and we'll see that here in a second. All right, so now that I've got that, I'm going to set my 2B pencil down for a second. I'm going to take my eraser and kind of clean up my edges somewhat really fast, just so that I don't smudge more and what have you. But I'm also going to, I might pick out a few kind of choice, um, you know, highlights here and there. And you can hopefully see that, by starting off very, very lightly, these lines and everything are easy to erase as I'm going, because once again, the lighter the graphite, the easier it's going to be to erase it. And once again, I'm using my brush to get rid of my eraser dust, because if I use my hand, well, I'm going to smear everything and everything like that. So I want to try to avoid that so I can keep it all as crisp as possible. All right. Now, let's do just a few things here and there. So you can see right now I'm erasing this heavy line, and that's because the actual line is going to be much, much lighter, and it's actually created through the delineation of these two forms. And we'll pick that back out here in just a minute. All right, so, well, we're gonna pick a few things. All right, so now that I've got a basic idea of what is kind of going to be what, now I'm going to go back to my 2B pencil, and I'm going to start really kind of redefining some of these things in terms of their overall darkness. So once again, I'm paying very close attention to what I see. And right now, I'm once again using the side of my pencil, and I'm trying to be very careful. And I'm just trying to kind of delineate where some of those darker passages are going to go. And I'm still going all the same direction right now. But here in a minute, we're going to start to vary that as well. All right. And you see here, I'm going to stop just shy of going up to that edge, because there is a subtle amount of variation that happens there. All right, so by using the side of my pencil lead as well to do this, I create a much smoother kind of look to the overall passage as well. And as I begin to crosshatch here in a minute, it will also start to smooth out a little bit more, but you'll start to see some more variations here and there and things like that. So once again, I really right now am only paying attention to those deep areas, or the deeper areas I should say, of those shadows. And with hatching, don't be afraid to go a little over the boundaries here and there. Especially depending on what you're doing, it can help to create a more kind of naturalistic sense, especially if you have passages that are not necessarily as hard edged in their delineations. So, in that case, what you can do is actually start to taper your lines somewhat. So, like in this case, even though these lines might be long over here, I'm only doing short ones and things like that. And so, same thing here. I can make some longer ones out there and then shorten them up a bit as I come down, and vice versa. And this will really start to, be more evident as I start to add extras, and especially when I change direction with them here in a minute as well. All right. Now, also, the harder I press with this, the more graphite's going to come off, the darker it's going to be, and everything like that. So it's just something to keep in mind as you go. All right. Now, for our glass. Now, on the glass here, there's a lot of lighter reflections that are going to come through this, and some of those I'm going to erase. Some of them I'm going to leave this initial, kind of sketchy lines, single hatching that I did, just so they appear lighter, and then I might erase back out of a few of them to get those like really nice bright pops of light here and there, things like that. So you'll probably see me do a little bit of back and forth in a variety of things here. Now the other thing too is that with the actual glass, it's probably going to go a lot lighter, or I'm going to go lighter than it's going to appear in general, just so that as I begin to really add the dark marks, it'll help to stand out a little more so that you guys can see it better. Now, aside from that, I also want to pick out just a few things here and there in these lighter passages. Before I start to go super dark. So some of these areas are probably not going to change all that much from what I've just done, but other ones are going to be getting, much, much darker. So once again, it's important to remember that, as we get darker, we're going to get more and more selective on where we're placing that darker mark and everything like that. So we're not just going straight up solid black right off the get-go. We're going to kind of, selectively increase the blackness, if you will. All right. So let's also come through and pick out some of the deep shadows in our drapery and things. So and once again, this, take your time with this. Really pay attention to what you see and everything like that. So let's come over here. Also, this is not a time for for you to lose sight of like your line work and everything like that. So, you can also keep looking, and you can see, hopefully as certain things begin to darken and whatnot, that, oh, well, maybe that line wasn't quite right, or, I know that one needs to be fixed, or, what have you. So it's, once again, we can always make corrections at any time throughout the process of our drawing. We don't necessarily have to fix everything in the line work stage. If it's possible to miss things. I do it all the time myself, so just keep that in mind. So once again, I'm still only going one direction right now, so I'm technically hatching, and I'm still using the side of my pencil. I won't really use the point until I start getting much more specific in my marks here in a minute, as I begin to darken things significantly. So keep that in mind as well. All right. And once again, I'm not going to be afraid to go over the edge of my my kind of boundary here at the moment, because I'm going to go back through and clean everything up again. So it won't really matter all that much now. Alrighty, let's do a few more here. And we're also going to do a few through here to indicate where it kind of, the drapery kind of comes through. All right. Now, the other thing too, if I was doing a blended drawing, I could start off like this and then start to smudge and make much more smooth kinds of transitions and whatnot. But because the main goal of what I'm doing now is to do hatching and cross hatching, I'm really not going to do that at this moment. But if you were doing this in a blended manner, we would sit there and kind of blur all this out, add some darker bits, kind of blend it out, add darker bits, blend it out, and it's just kind of back and forth like that. So something to keep in mind as well. All right. Now, okay, so I've got a pretty good delineation of my forms there. I have a general idea of how the shading is going to be, so I'm going to switch from my 2B pencil over to my 4B pencil. And now, so the main difference here is that the higher your pencil number goes, so 4B, 6B, it's going to be softer lead, so it's going to leave more of a mark when you make it, and it's also going to be darker because more of the graphite's going to come off. And likewise, if I was to really push down hard with this, it's also going to start to get more dark as well. So in that regard, I'm going to come through, and instead of using the side of my pencil this time, I'm going to start making marks with more of the tip of my pencil. So we're going to kind of, now I'm trying to be very smooth and fluid with this as well, but I also don't want to push down too hard just yet either, because I want to save that for uh, when I get really dark with the 6B and the 9B. And so right now I'm just kind of picking out some of the darker areas, and right now I'm still just hatching. I'm going the same direction as everything else. It's really not until the darker, when I switch over to the 6B, that I'll start to really kind of do a lot more the cross hatching. I'm going to do some cross hatching here in a minute with the 4B pencil after I pick out the darkest areas here and there. And so you'll see that. But right now I'm still just hatching. And so once again, as I'm doing this, I want to pay attention to the way that these shadows are curving, where they're appearing darker, and I want to only really place this stuff where I see the darkest bits. Or at least that's the main kind of idea. So let's also come down here. So for some of these things, I'm also wanting to be, very, very careful how far I go with them. All right. The other thing I find too is that I really like to hatch with a not completely sharpened pencil, because the sharper your tip is, the more um, you know linear this is going to look and less smooth it's going to look. So that's just something to keep in mind, that when the pencil tip is a little bit dull, I feel like it tends to look smoother than when it's, super, on point. Like if I was doing this with a mechanical pencil, my line would be very consistent in terms of, it's, I don't have to sharpen that or anything. However, they're going to be much more delineated, so we're going to see the individual lines much more in that case. And the other thing too, you'll see that, as I go, we can also start to create, the more you vary your angles, especially once we start really cross hatching, the more naturalistic it's going to look. Because right now I'm sure you can kind of see this faint ghost of the initial lines I did there. Well, we're going to kind of obscure those out with when we start to cross hatch here in a few minutes as well. And I'll step away in just a second so you can really kind of see this a little better. But in general, we're starting to selectively darken things here and there. Now, in the case of the glass, I want to pay attention to the areas of reflection and kind of leave them alone to some degree. And we're going to go back through and kind of add details and things to that here in a minute when, you know, we start to get really dark and everything like that, so that those things will stand out more. Some of these reflection details, things like that. So the other thing, you know, as you do this, you're going to have to sharpen your pencil from time to time, and so just be aware. All right. Now let's also do some of these kind of guys. Once again, I'm paying close attention to what I'm actually looking at. At least I'm trying to. And I'm trying to pay attention to the areas that are darker, much darker. Once again, I'm going to go through at the end with my really dark pencil, and I'm going to pick out a few things, you know, very specifically to just like really re-crispen up and just darken a lot. All right, so from there, let's also get some of those deep shadows here and there. Now, once again, I'm doing nothing but hatching at this point. So all of my lines have gone the same exact direction from the start. All right, so Now, a lot of this too is our recognition of, you know, these tones and things being accurate is, creating these boundaries between light and dark. And so, especially like in my drapery and things, I really want to watch where some of my, like where my lines start and stop. And, like this line right here, I'm going to probably come back and erase out so that it's really just the shading or the hatching lines that are creating that edge versus say an actual line. So I kind of went overboard with that line in the initial drawing, but once again, it's something I'm trying to, keep in mind so that I know where certain things go and everything like that. And so you can also see, I'm using my maul stick here to keep my hand off the surface of the drawing, because if I was to, rest my hand on this while I'm doing it, well, I'm going to smear a lot of this work that I'm doing, and then it's not going to look quite right, or at least not the way I want it to. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So the other thing too is you can start like at the edge or the line that forms the edge and go outwards from that. That way you're not going over that boundary too much and everything like that, such as I'm doing here. Because I really do want, this piece of the drapery to stand out because it's kind of lighter than what's going on around it. Likewise, I can pick out a few things here and there. And I also want to come down to the bottom and pick out a few things as well. Okay. All right, so now we've got a fairly decent start as far as all the hatching is considered. Now, if I wanted to continue hatching, I could just keep, going up, to 6B, 8B, and whatnot, and just, keep going the same direction and just darkening those little areas that I perceive as being darker. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start cross hatching. So once again, if we're hatching, we would just keep doing this up until we get the desired darkness that we wanted. Now, we could do that a variety of ways. I mean, I could sit here with the 4B pencil the entire time and just start really, switch from the side to the point and like really press down in those deep recessed areas, etc., etc. Or I could, once again, switch between the 6B and then the next and whatnot. But in this case, we're going to start to darken these with the 4B again, but I'm going to switch directions. So everything's been going this way. Now I'm going to go this way. So forgive me if I kind of get in your way a little bit as I go, but I'm going to, I'll also kind of stand back and here and there so you can see it as well. And once again, I'm trying to be very consistent in my mark making and my lines and everything like that. And I can vary the length of my lines depending on what I'm doing here and there. Now, I am kind of drawing at a little bit of a weird angle, so it's not quite as natural for me right now because I want you guys to be able to see what I'm doing without really changing the orientation a whole lot. So forgive me for kind of getting in your way a little. And once again, if I vary my pressure, I can also create variation in how, hard and, how soft the lines look and whatnot. All right. The other thing is that you can tailor these lines to, kind of go with the curves and whatnot that you see, so that they kind of echo the major outlines and whatnot, which can also help to give sense of the form within the drawing as well. Considering that we are making these all basically out of nothing but lines, that's something that can increase the overall realism in our drawing. All right, so you can see as we begin to add extra lines going the opposite direction that we also start to get more variation, and it begins to look darker. And also as I go, I can start to really push down harder here and there to get darker passages as well. And once again, as I go, I'm going to become more and more selective in where I put some of these things, so that we begin to get the idea of those value shifts in the drawing itself. The other thing too is that the more you vary your angles in this, the deeper it's going to look as well. So although like right now I'm going all the same direction, once again, when I switch pencils to 6B, I'll go a different direction as well. And so once again, that will really start to, you know, darken a lot of this stuff up quite a bit. All right. Forgive my silence. Just trying to concentrate. All right, so let's do a few more things. So just hitting a few things that I missed. Here and there. Okay. So now I think, hold on just a second. Now I think we're ready to switch from the 4B to the 6B, or at least here in just a second. Now the other thing to think about too is you can see here my lines are fairly spread apart, which is going to make the whole passage seem lighter in general, versus if they're really close together where it's going to make it appear darker. So that's something to keep in mind as well. All right, so now what I want to do, I'm going to switch over to my 6B pencil, and now we're going to really start to darken things up. And now I want to be really careful about my lines, and so I'm probably going to redefine a few of my lines here and there, and then we're going to selectively pull some detail-y things out of them as well. So in this case, I'm going to be much more careful and much more deliberate in where I'm placing. And so in this case with the 6B, I'm shifting my angle again. And this time I'm going vertical. All right. When I go to my 9B here in a minute, that's when I'm going to start picking out individual lines again, and I'm also going to make a lot of these marks that I'm making adhere to the contour of the general outline and whatnot as well. So then we'll get kind of a more interesting look at it. Now, once again, you can vary your angles up quite a bit. So in this case, I'm going more horizontally just for the nature of this one shadow alone. It's just going to make it easier on me. So that's something too you can think about is, you know, what's the major orientation of the area that you're shading, and kind of make your lines adhere to that. Now I'm going to go back to 4B for just a second because I realized something that I missed. So forgive me there. Once again, I'm not perfect. However, you can also see that even with the 6B, the harder I push down, the darker the mark is that I'm going to make. But I can also make these lines somewhat lighter as well. This is, once again, an area where I should have gone more vertical, or horizontal, I should say. Likewise. Okay. The other thing too, on round objects such as what I'm doing right now, the more variation in your angles, the rounder it's going to appear as well. Because we won't have quite as much of a straight, hard-edged, you know, kind of line and look to it. A few things are getting a little bit away from me. I'm going to pick them back out just so I don't lose sight of them. All right. You also see at this point, some of these areas, it doesn't really matter if I go over too much, because the lighter passages are still going to look fairly light by comparison, and those darker areas are just going to get darker. So especially on something transparent like this, being a little sloppy can also kind of work to my advantage to some degree as well. Okay. I'm going to sharpen my pencil really quick. Okay. So once again, right now it's a little kind of messy here and there, but really gonna clean it up and make things pop here in just a second. So bear with me. Okay. Now, let's do a few more of these kind of background elements. All right, a few more. All right. Okay. Okay, so from there, let's now on this drapery and things, I'm gonna come in and like selectively darken everything to its most extreme, or at least in the most extreme parts. And then I might come back to my 6B pencil and kind of generally darken it up a little bit more, just to give that idea of the black in it and whatnot. So let's switch over to the 9B pencil or the ebony pencil if you have that. So what I'm going to start with is just kind of coming through and picking out some of the areas of, like heavy shadow. And I'm going to kind of redefine a few of those lines here and there. But I'm going to let a few of these lines really stand out as well. So you can probably see how much darker 9B is compared to 6, and so the ebony would be pretty similar in that regard as well. Now also in some of these cases, I'm really not pushing this pencil down all that hard, but as I come up, I'm also trying to pull away as I go so that I get kind of, a line that's only really heavy where I want it, and then it kind of tapers off in its intensity. I'm going to switch angles again when I start to shade with this as well. And it's okay, like you can go the same angle. So like this case, I'm going to start going the opposite, back this way. But because I'm being more selective with it, it's going to, kind of read differently, if you will, and everything like that. So, and once again, I can alter my pressure here and there. So you can see, like there, for instance, I did not go all the way down with the line on there because I only want to selectively darken part of it. Now the other thing, this ebony pencil is very soft, so you're gonna have to, sharpen it quite a bit more than your other ones. So the softer the graphite, the more you're gonna have to sharpen it, because the easier it's gonna be to wear down. Okay. So also want to pay attention to little details in the dark passages here as well. Because once again, it's the little details that really bring life to your drawing. So I can make little indications here and there of areas that need to go darker and what have you. Okay, now I realized I forgot a piece of the shading over here as well. Okay, now we're really starting to fire it up. Okay. So once again, I'm gonna make probably more variations in how these lines are actually being laid down than any of the other ones. Because once again, my goal is to start picking out like details and things like that. And we're going to do another round on a few of these areas with this guy as well. And I'm going to switch directions just so you can see how much darker some of this can go. But hopefully you can kind of start to see, you know, how this works. And how we go about picking some of these things out. All right, now. Sharpen again. You can also see my 9B pencil is a little short, so I'm using my extender, my pencil extender in this case, because I don't want to just throw a pencil away that still has a lot of good usable material in it, just because it's getting a little short. That's up to you. You know, I've always taken the opinion that because art supplies are so expensive that I try to get the most use out of them as I can before I, go off and get a new one or new material and whatnot. Okay. All right. Okay, let's go through and pick out a few things here and there. Okay. We're getting pretty close. Like I said, we're gonna kind of go back and do a few things here and there. They're gonna darken parts of this even further. And we might erase a few parts here and there too, just to give them some pops of highlights and what have you. Okay. All right, from there. Let's also pick out a few things here and there. Time to sharpen again. All right. Okay. Now that we've got a lot of our mega dark areas established, I'm going to kind of go in and kind of fill in a few of the, well, we're just going to kind of use the side of my 9B here, and we're going to kind of fill in those lighter passages so that now they'll appear more like the dark gray that they are. And like right now, I'm really not pushing the pencil. I'm just letting it touch the paper and glide across it. All right, so I'm going to set that aside for a second, and I'm going to re-erase somewhat. So I'm going to clean it up a little bit, and then we're going to go back to the 9B, and we're going to, really selectively darken up just a few things here and there, and then we're going to call this drawing complete. So the other thing, maybe you can see that. So you can see the graphite on the side of my hand. That's just from touching this. So this is why I normally use the maul stick, because I smudge, and you can perhaps see where it's smudged on the paper here as well. And so, we want to avoid those kinds of things. Now, obviously, if we're taking up the entire paper, it doesn't really matter all that much. But it's just something that, you can, it's just something to be aware of, really, as you're doing this, because once again, we want our drawings to look like they were, well done, that the craftsmanship was, considered while we were doing it. So, it's not something that, like, after the fact is like, oh my, we forgot to clean our drawing up, and we've got all these smudge marks all around that make it look kind of bad, or unprofessional, if you will, and what have you. Now the other thing you'll notice that like the darker graphite, like the 9B pencil, also starts to leave a lot on your eraser itself. So you can rub it on your sandpaper thing here and there and kind of clean it off, and that way you're not re-smudging as you're erasing, because sometimes like that excess graphite that's on the eraser will also smudge on the paper elsewhere. So that's just something else to keep in mind and be aware of. So once again, I'm gonna knock all of my eraser dust there off with my brush. We're getting pretty close to being done with this drawing. In terms of cross-hatching and everything like that. Now it's important to note that you can, any drawing that you're shading with graphite, you can begin in this way, and then it's just a matter of going in and we can sit there and smudge and everything like that. So I might smudge the background a little bit just so you can see what that looks like, and we'll kind of smooth it out somewhat. So I'm gonna erase that line down a little bit. So that the cross hatching that we did there reads more as that. Now I'm going to switch back to 4B because I missed something there, and I want to make sure I get everything. Okay. Now, so again, I'm just kind of trying to clean up some of my lines here and there. And some of my highlighty areas. The areas with highlight, I should say. Now, if I was doing this on a toned piece of paper, like the Canson Mi Tientas, that was a color or some kind of color, I could also, use the white charcoal or the white pencil to come in and add, some highlights in the same manner if I wanted to. So once again, I'm just picking things that I missed. I am going to flip this over on you guys for just a second, just so I can get to this just a little easier. And once again, you know, you guys flip it around if you need to. You know, do whatever is going to make it easier for you. No problem there. Now, right now I'm using the 4B pencil, and I'm going fairly light. Okay. So there. Now I'm going to take my eraser to just a few little areas here and there in this. Okay. Now let's switch back over to the 9B and let's go ham on a few of the dark areas. Now I'm going to be really deliberate in my line making. And I'm also going to sharpen this pencil several times. So bear with me. Okay. Now. Okay. This is also the time where you can add little details and things like that as you go. Once again, make sure that you're paying close attention to everything that you see. Okay. Alrighty. Alright. Getting close here. Alright. Gotta sharpen again. Okay. Almost there. So now what I want to do is just kind of generally darken my shade, my drapery. Okay. You can see as I'm doing this, once again, I'm using more of the side of the pencil, and I'm pushing down a little bit in this case, but I'm still mostly letting the mostly just letting it glide across the surface, if you will. So there we pretty much have it. Now, once again, I'm gonna go through and clean up everything here and there. All right. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna resharpen my 9B, and I'm gonna pull out my handy dandy ruler. Now, obviously, this isn't something that you guys would be doing if you were drawing on the full sheet of paper, because you need to be filling the entire sheet of paper. But because I have this nice little outline, I'm just gonna reestablish it. Suffice it to say that, you know, sometimes even I can't use a ruler properly. All right. So there we pretty much have it. We have a drawing done with hatching and cross hatching. That's fairly accurate to the you know, what I've got on the table there. So once again, I could go in and I could really sit there and start to smudge all of this. So, you know, for instance, I can come through with my finger and kind of soften that, but you can see how much graphite will come off if you do that. And you know, it will get more smooth in general. However, you will probably see a lot of this line work that you've done, you know, in terms of the hatching lines, unless you really get in there with like a paper towel or a blending stump and really go to town on it. So for instance, you know, From this, I could sit there and I could go through the whole thing and just start to really, smooth everything out very carefully and whatnot. Now, that would still require me to go in and do quite a bit of, things here and there. So I would have to kind of be aggressive and then kind of go back and retouch a few things, or re-add some darks here and there and whatnot. But it's something I could do if I wanted. So I'm just kind of going over the background area just to differentiate it a little bit. Once again, you can see how much graphite comes off just by rubbing it, and everything like that. So it's something to be aware of as you're going. But that's pretty much it. Like I said, if I wanted to really, sit there and smooth all this out, I could. I could also use the blending stump as I went. So if you saw how I was laying it on with the side of the pencil very lightly, if I was doing this very smooth and not just as a hatched kind of drawing, I would lay it in like that and try to be very consistent in terms of how much I'm covering. And then I would use my finger, paper towel, blending stump, depending, to really get in there and, smooth it all out. And then I would add more, smooth it, add, like start with 2B, smooth it, 4B, smooth it, 6B, smooth it, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's basically how we can go about shading with a pencil fairly accurately, yet also fairly simply. So thanks for joining me. We'll see you again next time.